Hey, hello and welcome. This is Summer Piha from the Conscious.Classroom Certification Model. Check us out at cccmodel.com. You're listening to Let's Talk ECE, the place on the internet where we talk tips, tricks, and perspective shifts related to all things early childhood. Join Summer and Rachel in their mindset shifting discussions on common topics in the early childhood world. You'll hear real stories from their time working together as an owner-director pair and how they learn to see things from each other's perspectives over the years, so you can learn how to openly discuss these viewpoints and find common ground within your leadership team. Hello, and welcome back to Let's Talk ECE. I'm Summer.
And I'm Rachel.
And today we need to talk about the topic of transitions. Right? So to me, September is cleansing. When the kids go back to school, you, as a grown-up human, get to put the pieces of your life back together. And whether that means like deep cleaning your house or throwing away all those little toys from the crane game or all that junk you've collected over the summer, or maybe it's just you have time to actually organize the files on your computer, right? Like I always look at September like it's the start of a brand new year and a time to, in a way, I say this and it's so funny, but in a way, make some New Year's resolutions.
I love that. And I love when you say it, New Year's resolutions, right?
Yes.
And that a big part of that is, we just talked about it today, getting back into those routines. As we go back into school, it really is all about the state of building routine. And I feel like it's such this weird oxymoron, right? Because it's to get back into routine, it requires you to be flexible in some way, right? New routines and change comes with this level of required fluidity. So we can get that routine that really works for us.
Yes. So today we're going to talk about this transition season from a leadership perspective. So knowing that as an ECE leader, your job is more than just the staff or the kids or the parents. It's a combination of everything. So what does this transition season look like for each person, from parent to child to teacher to you as the director or you as the owner, and how the impact of this change gets bigger and bigger?
It is so wild. And I think we should talk through each one of those, right?
Yeah.
So parents, and we just talked about, as a leader, it's not just the kids, it's not just the parents, it's not just your staff, it's all of them. But parents are focused on themselves and their children. That's their job, that's their priority, right? And parents are spending a lot of time just trying to figure out those new morning routines. I know we're working through that this morning in my household, where it's the second day of school and my son was tired from the first day, so he didn't want to get out of bed until 8:30. When do we do breakfast in that time frame? What does this look like, right? When do I have snack or pickup? I'm not focused on what's happening in the classroom. I'm focused on my portion of that routine and what it looks like for my child, right?
Yes. Well, and I have 3 kids, and this is the first year they've ever taken the bus. So 3 kids, 3 different bus schedules. And at the elementary bus stop yesterday, the parents waved their kids off, chatted for a few minutes, and went on about their day. And at the middle school bus stop, there was a mama in tears because she was sending her son off to a new school. And I have to tell you, I did not see that coming. Like in my mind, I was like, oh, it's middle school. It's fine. I'll walk him down today and then he's got it, right? Yeah. I really thought by middle school, parents were ready to get rid of the kids.
And go.
But this really goes to show how transition seasons affect everyone differently. And the big question is, how can we use this experience in our leadership? Okay, so you might be thinking right now, like, I don't have a middle schooler. I don't even have elementary kids. How's this going to help me? So I want to look at this in terms of early childhood education. Okay, so you might have this thought or this preconceived notion, right? That, a mama of a new baby is going to need lots of support, or maybe there'll be some tears that drop off. And then in reality, maybe she's so thankful for help, so thankful for support and a break that she's okay. But then a mom of a 3-year-old is leaving in tears. Maybe it's even a 3-year-old that's been with you since the child was a baby, right? But maybe this mama of a 3-year-old's leaving in tears because now she's not getting that daily report. And that's a huge leap for her. Right. Okay. So this is when I talk about transition seasons, they affect people differently. And from a leadership perspective, your willingness to understand this can make all the difference in the world.
It does. It makes such a huge difference in how you communicate with people, right? And how people feel welcome and how they're willing to talk to you. An example is even this morning, not an easy, but it would have been the same situation as my son forgot his lunchbox. And so I went back, I was carrying it in, and somebody stopped that happened to know him. They're not his teacher, not the principal, not just somebody that's worked with him in the past. And, oh, did he forget this? Let me bring it to him.
Yes.
Right, because you knew we're getting into that new routine. So they offered that level of flexibility, which was so kind. Yes. Instead of approaching with like, oh, I bet you're frustrated, move on. And then,
well, and that brings us right into teachers.
Yeah.
Teachers, right? So the next thing that we as leaders have to talk about is teachers, and where are the teachers focused on? They're focused on their classroom and the transitions that are taking place within those walls, right? So maybe they have new children, maybe the whole classroom has been rearranged and it's a new setup. There's new routines that need to happen, getting everyone back in the habits of a school year. We know, even if you're a year-round program, and I was a year-round program, but the summertime, we spent a lot more time outside. And so the second September rolls around, we had to get back into the habits of a school year. They're different than during the summer months.
Yeah. And I think the thing that we have to realize too is teachers are being flexible and fluid, right? So as a parent, I was being flexible with being like, I guess I have to go back and bring my child his lunch. Like those things are going to happen as we work out those kinks, and teachers are doing the same thing, but within their classrooms, those first few weeks, right? They're building those foundations, they're figuring out what works, and they're changing their plans. They all have these beautiful visions in their mind, but different behaviors, different dynamics of little friendships that are happening can be really, really exhausting. So to just understand that they are putting in that effort and having to be flexible in so many ways already.
So I think from a leadership perspective, right? Keeping everything we just said in mind, what are some ways that you can help your teachers during this first few weeks of school? Things like trying as hard as you can to not switch lunch breaks, right? Because they're already being flexible and fluid in their classroom. They're learning so many new things, new names, new habits, new routines, new friendships, like Rachel said. And so we as the leadership can really support them by keeping their schedules consistent, trying not to change breaks, trying not to shift children into their classroom. Sometimes we do that for ratio wise. I think just doing everything in our power to keep things as consistent as possible for the teachers. What do you think, Rachel?
Oh, I think that's really important. For me as a director, I always tried to not make a lot of scheduling things. I tried to get ahead of a lot of stuff, ahead of orders, ahead of payroll, ahead of whatever I could do. So those first 2 weeks, I could be present for those parents that are, oh, you forgot the lunchbox, let me carry it back for you. And the teachers who are already being so flexible. So just being super conscious of your routine each day, and that's going to look a little bit different. I think one of the things that was always really important to me as a teacher was, I am glad everybody's excited, but also don't run into my classroom and disrupt what I have going on. That can be frustrating too. So how are you going to communicate if there is a change throughout the day? Kind of figuring those things out, because it is a time of excitement, but also there's a ton of potential for overwhelm.
Yes. Very important to think about from a leadership perspective. So let's just keep going. Let's keep talking about like directors. So you as a director or a member of the leadership team. So your job is to look at the school as a whole. So all the classrooms and any transitions taking place. And I think you said it perfectly, Rachel, where you were in control of your schedule and basically cleared your schedule for the first 2 weeks. So you could be there to help with parents, to help with children who are having tough drop-offs, to help your teachers handle this transition period, right?
Exactly.
And be there to best support everyone.
And to just keep it in the front of my brain that everybody is being really flexible, because sometimes it's easy as a director to sit and go, nobody wants to be flexible. Everybody's so stuck in their things. They don't want to change at all. No, there's so much flexibility that's happening in their own little spaces and worlds. It just looks different from the flexibility I'm having to give.
Yes.
Right? Because those roles are different, and that's okay, but you have to keep that in the front of your mind as well. So being really conscious, if you're expecting the school year to go out really, or to start off really strong, you want to be super conscious about how are you going to spend your time? How are you going to show up? What is that going to look like?
Yes. It's something that helped me as a parent, but then also as an educator is just because it's happening now doesn't mean it's going to be like this forever.
Yes.
Like when my kids were little, I remember like cutting the crusts off a toast and I was like, I've cut 16 crusts off a toast today. This is my life now. What's happening? And it's a phase.
Yeah.
And so if we can look at this first few weeks of school, first month of school as a phase, it's not going to be like this forever. So kind of have that as a mantra and keep it in the back of your mind. Like, this is a phase. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So the owners now,
Yep.
I can, that's me. Let me jump in, right? So owners, we're visionaries. Most of us are visionaries, and we have to think about all of our programs and if we have different locations. And so we're really all encompassing. And can I just say, as an owner, one of the hardest things for me was this like real life time. And let me explain that, because that might sound kind of weird, but I had this vision and I wanted it to happen right now. But things take time. Real life time. And so
not Lifetime movie.
No, or like HGTV bathroom updates where it's like half an hour later, you have this great bathroom. No, but like real life time, because we're humans working with humans. And as an owner, let me tell you, this September season wasn't incredibly busy for me. And I do have to say, I was an offsite owner. They kicked me out. I gave my job away too many times and they said, we don't need you here anymore, right? So I was an offsite owner, and this September season wasn't incredibly busy. I had to remember that everyone else is working on all the new things. So I can't show up and put more on their plates or show up and rile all the children up and then leave, right? So in a way, September was one of my slowest times as an owner. So I used this time for reading, catching up on any of those books, those business books you want to read and you put it on your list, or you have a stack of them and you're like, oh, I'll get to it later. I used this time to catch up on some reading or do some self-care, work on creative projects that didn't require other people.
Well, and can I say, as a director, I appreciate that so much, because one, I could reach out to you if there was something specific.
Absolutely.
Right? Like I had that opportunity and we could connect, and I got a lot of support when I needed it. And it really would have been easy for you to say, like, I'm not super busy. Here are all of these ideas.
Well,
Run with them. And then I would have been like, I hate everything.
I feel though like I probably did at some point. This was a learning curve.
Yeah.
Right?
Fair.
This was a learning curve, and it was a hard leap and a hard transition for me to make. But I knew I had to wrap my head around it so my programs could thrive. I had to get out of the way and let all of the amazing people do their jobs. So this brings us to, we've talked about parents, we've talked about teachers, we've talked about directors and owners, all these different people. And different people handle change in different ways.
Way differently.
Right. And okay. So I was at a conference earlier this summer and somebody described people this way, and it's just stuck with me. They were like, it's almost like everyone comes to the table with a bag on their arm. And in their bag is just this, all of their past experiences and just things that are really personal to them, right? And everyone's bags are filled with different stuff. So when we talk about how people handle change, it could be 100 different ways. And so let's run through some of the ones that stood out for us.
Yeah.
And this was a huge conversation we had yesterday because we were talking about, well, Rachel, I'll let you.
Yeah, I think what's really cool is we were having this conversation, and then essentially we cleared our entire calendar, our entire plans for the day, because we found this so important.
Yeah.
So I sat down, and we'll talk about the specifics of it later. I want to walk through because Summer and I want to talk about how we had the conversation. But sat down and listed out a few of those things that we noted as how people handle change. So things like excitement. The ones I put on there initially were excitement, anxiety, and indifference, right? And then Summer added in resistance. I was like, oh, that's very fair. I lumped that in with anxiety, but that's a whole different thing. And then as we're talking together, we realized fear was another one.
Yes.
And I really loved what you said yesterday, which was there are probably 30 or 100, or we don't know. There's so many different ways, but with our bags, with the stuff we have in them, this is how we know people handle.
We can only see what we see. We can only see what we know. And so really keep an eye out for what your past experiences are bringing to the table for you. So, okay, when we talk about how people handle change, let's talk about excitement.
Yeah. That's you talking, you're excited.
Okay.
I'm not excited about
this
change.
one's for me. Like because I'm a visionary, right? Like I get super excited. I always say it's like I drink the Kool-Aid. I'm a marketer's dream. Mm-hmm. It does not take me long to drink the Kool-Aid. I go straight from learning about it to excitement, like in a flash. And I like learning new things. And so I think with that comes like change. Change comes when you learn new things, and it just makes me incredibly excited.
Yeah.
Then I go straight to anxiety because I didn't ask the follow-up questions. I just was like, I'm in, let's do it, let's go. And then I go straight to anxiety about like, I don't know anything about this. I should have asked more questions. I don't really know. How's this going to go? Is this going to it's going to be bad. Oh. So going to straight to anxiety after excitement for me.
And I love that you talk about that, because how you and I experience anxiety even is different. Because for me, the anxiety is, I do ask all the questions. I have the information typically, but I'm a perfectionist. So I don't like going in and knowing, okay, I know hypothetically what I'm supposed to be doing and what this looks like, but I've never put it into practice. So I'm going to be terrible at it and fail. And then there's this anxiety of like, is everybody going to see me fail? What does this look like? Blah, 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 blah. Right. So even that anxiety, it's the same feeling internally, but can come from different spaces.
Yes.
Where I typically find, and this was a really big conversation this Summer and I yesterday, is I sat down and I said, I think a big one that comes up is this indifference with a need for clarity. And what I mean by that is when I hear in my mind, the idea of change, like, hey, we're going to do this. I'm like, okay, but why? Like, I don't actually care if we do something new or if we do it the same. I have this level of indifference right off the bat until I gain more information. I cannot get excited. I don't feel anxiety about it. I just am stuck. I'm just indifferent. I'm like, what is internally? That's what's happening. Externally, however, and this was the good conversation.
Externally, I said, okay, you said indifference with the need for clarity, but I take it as resistance because you're really hesitant. And having these conversations have really helped our working relationship. But that's like where it was like resistance, thinking about where does this come from? What's in your bag that's causing the resistance, right? Yeah, go ahead,
I
Rach.
was gonna say, I think it's so interesting because with me, it was I 100% when she was explaining that does look and sound like resistance. And in my brain, that's never what it was. So I'm glad we have this conversation so I can understand how it's being perceived and can maybe change some verbiage or whatever. And you just know now.
I was going to say, how powerful is this as coming from a leadership perspective?
Yeah.
Knowing that, and you have to keep in mind, Rachel and I've worked together, gosh, 7 years now. So
7 years, like yesterday.
Yeah. So it's like taken some time to get here, but to be able to say, okay, when I come to you with a project, I don't feel like you might think you're being indifferent, but it feels resistant. Right? Like, wow. Okay. So from a leadership perspective, knowing that, okay, when Rachel asks questions, it really is a place of indifference. She's not pushing back. It's not that she doesn't want to do it. It's indifference.
And I want to do it, I want to know the why so I can get excited with you.
Yes.
But I have a hard time getting to that excitement. And excitement's important to Summer. So that's one of the other conversations that we've had to have is like, okay, I want to show up more excited for you because you also deserve to feel that.
But I don't also knowing where Rachel's coming from, I can't get an idea in my mind and call her without having more information. I remember a phone call I made to her where I was like, okay, we're putting this date on the calendar. And she's like, why? What is it? And I'm like, I don't know yet. We're hammering all the details out later, but I'm just so excited. I'm so pumped. Like, it's this date, it's March something, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, but what do we need to do? And
my job is to be the implementer, right? So all immediately my brain went into, okay, I want to make sure I'm setting you up for success. And that's why in my head it was indifference. So I was like, I want to make sure I see your excitement and I want to get us there so it's clean. And
I was just more like, we're going to map that out in the afternoon session. So I don't know, but I'm just so pumped. I just had to call you right away. So now knowing that, I don't call her about things until I have more information because I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair for her to have that internal panic, anxiety, resistance, indifference, whatever it is, so I can have my excitement, right? So it's helping us with this working relationship. So we talk about these things because I want you to think about all these different people that you're working with, right? You're working with parents, you're working with the children, you're working with teachers, you're working with your peers, colleagues. How does everyone handle these transition seasons? Are they coming from a place of excitement? Are they coming from a place of anxiety or indifference, resistance? Right? I think of veteran teachers. Gosh, you try to get a veteran teacher to do anything different, and they're like, it's never going to work. Never going to work. Right? Or are they coming from a place of fear? And what does that look like? What does it look like when people are afraid?
And it might look like resistance. It might look like anxiety. It might look like just avoidance. Like, I'm going to run away from you because if you can't tell me what this new change is, then I don't have to adhere to it.
Exactly. So as a leader, and kind of like we said earlier, these are the ones we came up with. That's what we were able to pull out of our bag and share with you. You might be able to pull different words out. Okay, so I want you to think about this from a leadership perspective when you're showing up for all of these different groups of people. And are you able to identify how are they handling this change? And what can I do to support each person?
And I think, just what Summer and I just demonstrated too is how do you show up in change? And how do you show up in change internally? And how is that perceived? Because those are not necessarily the same.
Yes. Okay. So my big question is, where do we go from here? As ECE leaders, what do we do with information? There's so many people, we love to collect information, but what do we do with this? And I will tell you, most people are not sitting around having these deep discussions about transition seasons. You're far too busy because you're running a school. You're taking care of all these people, right? So we have to think about, what do we do with this information?
Yeah. And I think for me, it's really starting to talk about those different perspectives. You know what you know, right?
You know what's in your bag.
You know what's in your bag. You can maybe figure out what's in somebody else's bag that you're close to. But unless you're having conversations and open to actually hearing them,
Yes,
then contention would happen, right? The way Summer and I can avoid contention is because we have these clarifying discussions, and we don't even call them like, I think at the beginning we work together, sometimes I have to have a hard discussion with Summer. And it's not how I perceive it anymore. It's just a clarifying discussion.
yes.
Right? And I think we should walk through just how we had that conversation yesterday with that different, or that example of indifference versus resistance.
Yes, I think you're exactly right, because I think it's almost like soft skills a little bit, where we hear time management, we hear delegation, we hear all of these things, and we're like, right, but how? So I know I'm supposed to have this conversation, but how? And so I would just encourage you to ask questions and come from a place of curiosity instead of judgment.
Yeah. And instead of just responding, instead of knowing, if Summer would have come at me and said, no, you're just resistant, I would have been like, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere. There wouldn't have been an understanding because I would have shut down.
Yeah.
So what happened was I started off and we were talking about what we wanted to talk about today and how do people handle change differently? And I said, in my head, it's 3 categories. It's excitement, anxiety, and indifference with a need for clarity. How does that feel to you? Right? And Summer, you responded.
I just said, I've never thought about it like that. Like, I was working on something completely different. And so the question kind of caught me off guard a little bit because I wasn't on that same train of thought. And so in my mind, I was like, I don't want to say yes. I don't want to say no. I need to think about it a little bit more. So my thought process was, I've never thought about it like that.
And that statement gave pause, so there was room for consideration. She didn't just go, as I go back to her computer, right? So I felt heard and knew that there would need to be time to think about it.
Well, okay. And so then I asked a question about the indifference, because I was like, excitement I get, anxiety I get. Like, tell me more about resistance, right? But I was like, to me, it doesn't feel like the indifference, but it does feel like resistance. Yeah. And that's what I said. To me, it doesn't feel like indifference. It feels more like resistance, right? And it's the to me part that personalizes it, right? It's not finger pointing at Rachel and attacking her character. It's just, we're opening up this conversation. It's not accusatory. It's my view. And it opened up this huge discussion for us about resistance versus indifference. And this allowed us to pull out different instances. And I will say, not in a way of keeping score, but to really take a look at things and be honest with ourselves.
And with each other.
Truth,
Yep.
and with each other. And so when I was like, hey, remember this whole social media situation where our social media person would send things one at a time, and then you would change it. That felt resistant, right? That didn't feel indifferent. That felt resistant. And once again, I'm not attacking character. We're just having this conversation. And really taking a look at things, taking a look at ourselves.
It's important. And when we're able to approach things like that, and there was another example that came up too, where we would talk about like, hey, this isn't getting done. And I'd be like, hey, Summer, what's going on here? And she was like, I don't like blank documents. And I would just be like, cool, fill out this blank page. Good luck. Right. This is what I want you to do.
Yeah.
And she was super open with me to say, I don't like blank documents. So now we shift how we work. So we don't get stuck. So we can talk about it. I can make a brief outline, and then she rocks it. And it's amazing.
Even if it's like 5 words on a page, it's not a blank document. And once again, these conversations, and I want to lead this back to like you as a leader, how to have these conversations, how to support all the different people that you take care of in your days, right? This is how to have these working relationships so we don't get stuck.
Yeah. And to say things like, to me, or this is my perception. Can you tell me what's going on here? Can you walk me through your thought process? Inviting that feedback is so important. Like noticing this isn't getting done. What's happening? What's up? How can I support you?
Absolutely. And then noticing within yourself too. Am I feeling judgmental?
Yeah.
Am I feeling judgmental? This was a process that I had to work through. And I still find myself, it's like when I start to get like hangry or crabby, that's when my judgment zone creeps in. And I have to identify it within myself and say, hey, knock it off. And so I sort of switched to, like, if I would see somebody running on the side of the road, like my first thought is always like, ew, why are you running? Gross. And that's super judgmental, right? But to show up from a place of curiosity where I'm just like, hey, good for you for getting out and doing something you like to do. Or even if you don't like to do, like, I don't know. I mean, when you're driving, you see them for 30 seconds, right? 20 seconds.
How slow are you driving?
I'm like a grandma driver. But no, to shift that thought into, hey, good for you. Good for you for getting out and doing something. And just starting to recognize when we're creeping into that judgment zone and doing a shift or a reframe.
Yeah.
All of this ties together in how we show up for our team, how we show up for our parents, how we show up for the children. And I think it's a conversation and a topic worth exploring in yourself.
I do too. And I think having that conversation with yourself, with your leadership team. And then for me, it was really important. Like I started working on some of these skills when I was a director, because there were teachers that I butted heads with. And instead of me getting into this judgment, it took a while. It had to be pointed out to me. Let's be very honest. But when I got into that judgment zone, I'm like, well, why do you feel that way? Can you find it from a different perspective? And now I can ask myself those same questions, right? Like, why do I feel that way? Oh, because I hate running and I don't like being sweaty, right? Like got it.
Well, I was going to say, for me, a lot of times it's jealousy. Like, oh, I wish I could run, but I can't. Yeah. And so when I would see a runner, it would like only when I'm hungry or crabby. It's not all the time, but it would like ping me. It would be like, oh, look at that runner. And it's like, I wish I could be that person. I wish I had the energy and stamina and excitement for running, but I don't. Doesn't mean I have to judge that person.
And I think one thing that you said that just really stuck out to me is we're kind of coming to an end here too in this discussion, though, is it's being able to reframe those situations, but it's also being able to reframe the conversations.
Yes.
Right? That I think is so important because it is so easy to hype ourselves up. And so many of our clients, I don't want to say that because it's going to be this big deal. I don't like conflict. And that was me. It still is me sometimes, but it's gotten a lot better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I will just say, if you've enjoyed this conversation, please drop a comment down below, like, follow, subscribe, and we'll see you next week for more Let's Talk ECE.